So, good evening to George's family, to Beth. What I want to say is Reverend E.J. Roll's daughter. And I have to say all of this stuff because every time we have a gathering of this nature, I love the connections which we all have. There's a movie called 6 Degrees of Separation, and we all seem to be connected. And I was fascinated when I first went down to Exuma to learn that E.J. Roll was your dad. And he's one of the great Exumians. So nice to see you, and glad you allowed us to have this ceremony this evening. And it's important, and that's the reason why I asked Perry Malis to come and speak, because he said something at the funeral in 2008. And I can't believe 2008, such far, far away. Time has gone so quickly. But he said that when the British handed off the country to us in 1973, he repeated it in a different way here, you got the impression that this was a nice, smooth seal-off, you know. They did us well, built us into a great country, and then handed it off to us and say, do well. And he told the story of how they actually had to start from scratch. They had to look around, they had to start. There was no notes were left as to what to do. And so he and George worked together, building what is now first the Ministry of External Affairs and then the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is the job we carry out now. And that's why I wanted him to come and speak tonight, to show us how far we've come, where we've come from, and how all the people who were responsible for building this place. And I often remind people, you know, even though we got this independence in 1973, it was a legal step in some senses, also though an emotional step. But this was a country before that, before 1973. Our parents paid the taxes, which also paid the salary of the British governor. So it didn't just happen just like that. We helped to create this space that we now live in. I also want to recall why it is so necessary for us to be aspirational in the things we do with the country that we've now been handed. I've traveled to the Middle East, and what struck me, I was talking to the ambassador for Saudi Arabia today, the ambassador in Qatar, and previously to the ambassador for UAE. And what struck me about what they've been able to accomplish in those societies is that you literally go there and they say, in 10 years, we're going to have that. In 5 years, we're going to do that. In 20 years, this is what we're going to do. And we aspire to be number one in this, number two in that, number one in that. And it doesn't have to come true, but the first thing you've got to do is aspire to do it. That's the first thing. And that's what I admire about their culture, and I want to plant that message here tonight. And then I'll tell you how I first heard about George Stewart and first met him. So I got a liberal arts American education. Thanks to Jerusha's mother, I went to a university called Antioch in Ohio, which is as liberal as you can get in the Northeast U.S. No exams, just, and that was the main attraction for me. But my contemporaries in the Bahamas, most of them went to the University of the West Indies. So when we got back, 1974, I met a man named Philip Miller, and Felix Bethel, who went to Canada. And Philip Miller, he's here tonight, became the permanent secretary, and we were palling around in our 20s. And I became very jealous of everybody who had gone to UWI and wished I had gone to UWI. And they had this organization called the Guild of Graduates. And he said to me one night, Guild of Graduates is a meeting tonight. They met at what is now T.A. Thompson, was C.C. Sweeting, and was the technical college at the time. And they had this big meeting room. So we go in, and all of the movers and shakers of that age were all gathered there. And they made this wonderful decision that, notwithstanding the paucity of my education in American universities, I would be allowed to join the Guild of Graduates. So there I was. And this was the first meeting that was held by the Guild. So everybody's going along, making their contribution. And there was this man sitting alone up at the front somewhere. And he's looking around, looking around, looking around. And then finally it came his turn. And he said, I'm glad you invited me to this meeting tonight, because I want to know what the hell have you been doing? Where have you been? Because I haven't heard a darn thing from you. And I thought, who is this man? But everybody deferred to him that night. And everybody whispered, that was George Stewart, that was George Stewart. And the next time, of course, I saw him, he was interacting in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and built this reputation. I got to work with him as minister. He was Director General. He had the reputation of having established the law of the sea and the Bahamas' presence, the law of the sea. He was well known as an expert. People from across the world would ask, what is George Stewart's opinion on this, that, or the other? And time has now passed, and I'm going to repeat something which I've probably said to the annoyance of the diplomats this week. And that is Toni Morrison's interview with the New York Times a long time ago. And she was defending the women's movement and why the nomenclature of the women's movement had to change what you call things or call people. And she said, you know, when you have power, the one thing you get to do is to name things. And I said, this is my third time as minister. You know, I know lightning is not going to strike 4 times. So I better, while I have the power, do something to name some things. And so we're going to name this the medal after George Stewart, the library after George Stewart, and the distinguished lecturer after George Stewart. And I apologize that the Prime Minister's not here this evening, but I assure you, the cabinet paper was done on Tuesday, and I tell, you know, our diplomats and public servants, everything in this country runs by cabinet conclusion. The Constitution says the executive authority of the government resides in the cabinet, and the cabinet has concluded on this. And so we have the job to execute it. And that's why I gave the story about the Middle East and the aspirational aspects, because we have to now make this concrete. And one of the things which is on the drawing board, and has been for some time, is the question of a dedicated and built facility for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we're now at the stage where the cabinet has agreed that Foreign Affairs can have such a building. We're now also at the stage where the architects have gotten their instructions about what should be in the building. And they've also been to Jamaica, because Jamaica has, I don't know if you've been to Kingston and seen, they have a 10-story building, which is their Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We've been in it, the Prime Minister's seen it, thinks it's fit for purpose, and the architects have been there, Ministry of Works has been there, had the discussions about what the building should look like. And so when that building is constructed, I mean, it isn't a digital library, but it will have a proper George Stewart Library within that building with the proper. And I'm saying that because the people, if it isn't done in this term, and I'm going to try to do it this term, but you know, as I say, it's aspirational. The people who are in this room, some of them will be the people who run the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or may be the Minister of Foreign Affairs going forward. And I'd like them to hear it and say, if it's not done, this is something you will embrace and make sure it does get done, so that long after we have gone, the vision continues and the whole business of building our country, built on the mission and vision of the people who came before us. So that's the message from me and from the political directorate of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas today, that part of our job is still building the nation, even though, you know, we have to pay the salaries and make sure the roads are paved and, you know, that the gas prices come down and the power comes down and all the rest of that. We're working on that. But we're still in the business of building the nation. And as I look around the room, and it's already been described as a kind of family gathering, these events help to concretize the relationships between ourselves, and they also give us a sense that we are a nation. Saying Diane Abbott, who is the shadow spokesperson for Labor at one point in Foreign Affairs, we were having dinner. The Brazilian ambassador was hosting dinner, and she leans across the table to me and says, "Is the Bahamas a real nation?" Well, I said, "Yes, it is. Yes, it is." And all of you are witnesses to the fact that we are a nation. We are a nation. And I'm pleased to be Minister of Foreign Affairs at this time, to be a part of the government of the Bahamas. I cannot believe, many times I wake up and I try to pinch myself because I can't believe that this is the same boy who was riding his bicycle back in 1965 against the wind on Wolf Road, because when you're traveling east, you're driving against the wind, trying to get up the hill at St. Augustine to make sure I got to class at 8 o'clock, and now Minister of Foreign Affairs. I hope that's a story that can be repeated to the generations coming forward, and that when you look back at what we've done, you say, you did well, you did right, because you had the power to name things. And tonight, we named the library, the Distinguished Lecture Series, again, for George Stewart, the great Bahamian. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Mitchell and Director General Ali, for those remarks this evening.